In this tutorial, we'll learn how to use the graph editor. The graph editor is perhaps one of the most powerful and important features of After Effects. It lets you control what happens in between two keyframes, and that's immensely powerful. Let's have a look at how it works. Let me just go and simply animate this car to go from left to right. So I'm going to go select the car and then press P on the keyboard to reveal position, and then I'll click on the keyframe, and then I'll go forward, let's say by 1.5 seconds, and then I'll just click and drag this to the right, holding down the shift key so it's a straight line. So that's a simple position animation, and you'll see by default the speed of the animation remains constant. Let me just go and shorten the timeline a bit. I'm just going to go here, and then on the keyboard I'll press the letter N. That's going to set the endpoint of my work area bar, which means if I preview this by pressing spacebar, that's all I'm going to see. So just that part. I'm going to pause the animation. Now, in order to access the graph editor, you either press Shift and F3 on the keyboard, so it's Shift F3, or you click on this button at the top. That will take you straight into the graph editor. Sometimes when you do this, you're not actually going to see anything in here, and that's because you don't have a parameter selected. So if your graph editor is empty, just make sure that you click on the word position, or whatever property you're animating, and that will show you the parameter you've selected inside the graph editor. Let's make a bit more space for the graph editor first, so I'm just going to click and drag this up. The graph editor here shows us how fast the layer is moving per second. It tells us here it's now moving around about 900 pixels a second, and it keeps on moving at that rate, and it stops. So it drops down to 0. If you move your cursor over this line, it tells you exactly how fast it is. So it's 899.16 pixels a second. And these 2 points, this one and that one, they are the keyframes. Now if I come out of the graph editor, and then select the 2 keyframes, and then press F9, or I can just simply right click, keyframe assistant, and do easy ease. If I now go back to my graph editor, you see that the graph is much different. It's now a curve instead of a straight line. That's because we applied an easy ease to the animation. What does that mean? Well, it means that the layer is going to start slowly, then it will pick up speed, then it will slow down again. That's exactly what this graph represents. If I move my cursor here, and as I move my cursor over the graph, you can see that it's speeding up. It tells me the speed here. Round about here, it's at its peak. So that's about 1400 pixels a second. And then it drops down again gradually, all the way down to 0, and it stops moving. And of course, if you play this back, you see that's exactly what's happening. So it's slow at the beginning, fast in the middle, then slow again at the end. Now to change this even more, what you can do is to click on these keyframes to reveal the handles. These will reveal the Bezier handles, very similar to the handles in all around After Effects. You can click on these handles and change what's called the influence. So if I click on this handle, for example, and then drag this towards right, I'm now changing the influence, which means that I'm changing the amount of time it takes before it reaches its maximum peak. If I now play this, you'll see now it will take some time before it reaches the peak, around about 1 second and 5-6 frames, I guess here. So if I click here, it's about 1 second and 4 frames. And then abruptly, it will slow down. So if I go and play this, look. So you can see that's exactly what the graph represents. Slow at the beginning, fast around about here, and slow at the end. If I drag this one, so I increase the influence of this handle as well, which means it takes a bit more time to reach this speed here, which is 0 again. So if I now go and play it, you'll see what's going to happen here is that it's going to take its time to pick up speed around about here. Then quickly it's going to drop, and it's going to take its time to again slow down. So here's what the animation looks like, look. Let's say you wanted this to start quite abruptly. So if I go back, and if I create a graph like this, you see right away it starts fast, then gradually it slows down. So if I now exaggerate this as well, maybe a little bit, and if I play it, it'll just drop, and gradually it will slow down, look. And if I do the opposite, I just clicked outside by mistake, so the handles disappeared. So I'm just going to go and click on the keyframe to reveal the handles again. I'll then click and drag this to the right, all the way to the right, and then I'll click on this keyframe and drag this one to the right as well. So now it takes its time to pick up speed, and right towards the end, it just goes real fast and it stops. Here we go. And at any point, if you want these to go back to the linear keyframes, so the original keyframes, you can select them, and then come down here and click on this button, and this will convert the keyframes into linear keyframes. So that's now turned into a straight line, meaning that there's no slowing down or speeding up. If I go back to my timeline, you'll see that the keyframes look like diamonds again. I'll switch back to my graph editor. Instead of switching back and forth between the graph editor and the timeline, you can actually do pretty much everything in the graph editor. If I go select these keyframes, instead of pressing F9 or right-clicking on the keyframes to go to Keyframe Assistant, I can just go and select Easy Ease here, and it does the same thing as pressing F9. So this applies Easy Ease to the selected keyframes. Let's see how this works on a different property like rotation or scale. So let me go to this composition here. I have a simple layer here. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to select my arrow layer, and I'll press R to reveal rotation. So I'm going to keyframe the rotation at the beginning. Then I'll go to 1 second. And then I'll set this to be, let's say, -180. And then I'm just going to go forward a little bit and then press N here to set the end of my work area bar here so I can loop this part. If I hit space, you'll see it will play again and again. I'll simply switch back to my graph editor by pressing Shift F3. And now this looks a little bit different. Let me just make a bit more space here. You see this graph looks a little bit different. In this case, it's showing us not the speed, but the degrees. So it tells us that it starts from 0 degrees and it goes down to a negative value of 180. But again, it moves at a constant speed, so the line is linear. Now in order to change that, I can select these two and then press F9 or use this button, or I can hold down the Alt key, which is going to pick my Convert Vertex tool temporarily, and if I click on this keyframe with the Alt key, that's going to reveal this handle, and again if I hold down Alt and click on this keyframe, that's going to reveal that handle. I can then convert this line into a curve manually. For example, if I want the value to go from 0 to somewhere around, let's say, -100 quite quickly, I can click on this and then drag this one down. And you see, I'm changing the speed of this at the beginning actually. So it goes quite fast to about -100. Then it takes its time to go to about -180. Let me just curve the other one as well, maybe towards here a little bit. And now what this is going to do is to make it go from 0 to about -100 real fast. And then it will take its time to go from -100 to about -180. So here's what it will look like if I play it. You see it starts like a snap, so it goes real fast at the beginning, then it slows down. Let's reverse this. Let me just go click and drag this up. And I'll do the same for this one as well. I'll click and drag this up. Now what's going to happen is that it's going to take its time to go from 0 to about -100. Then it will abruptly drop from -100 down to -180. So if I play this again. So it's slow at the beginning and then fast towards the end. And if I create an inverted S, something like this, that's going to be similar to creating an easy ease. So it will start slowly, it will quickly then change speed, and it will then slow down again before it reaches this keyframe. So here we go. And while editing these handles, if you hold down the Shift key, you can lock that to move in a straight line. And I can do the same here as well. I can select this and then move it and then hold the Shift key down, and that will lock that to move only on a straight horizontal line. And then if I go back and play, you'll see that it will start slowly, it will pick up speed, then it will slow down again. And then finally, let's have a look at how we can do the same for scale. So I'm going to press Shift S to reveal scale as well. I'll go back to the beginning and I'll keyframe the scale at, say, 0%. I'll just go and keyframe this, and I'll go to 1 second again and then set this one to be 100%. And this time you can see the increase on this diagonal line, so it goes from 0% to 100%. I'll now hold down Alt and then click on this to reveal the handle, and Alt and click on this keyframe to reveal that handle. I'm then going to click on this handle with the Shift key held down so it locks the movement to be on a horizontal axis. And I'll do the same for this handle as well, so click and drag this up, hold the Shift key down so it's locked onto a straight line as well. And now what's going to happen is that the scale animation is going to start slowly, then it will pick up speed abruptly, then it will slow down again gradually. So if I play it back, you'll see what happens. In the next tutorial, we will talk about two concepts called undershoot and overshoot to create anticipation and more of an organic animation.